It starts from a single seed, dormant until it swells from the presence of water and begins to reach into the earth with miniature arms to pull nutrients. At the right moment, it breaks free from the earth, fragile and delicate with leaves reaching for the sky. Once it springs forth into maturity, it has no mind to realize the impact it has on the future of civilizations across the globe. It's just a small capsule that brings happiness to billions. These small vessels of life have provided life. Without them, life would cease. Have we forgotten their importance as the benefit of our existence? Has the importance become less of a priority in developed countries than it has in less developed societies? Have we taken for granted that our food will always be available to us for centuries to come? As time continues beyond our collective individual periods on this planet, imagine what would happen if we waste away the vital ingredients required for seeds to sustain the human population. Would our children's future be similar to the events in Soylent Green, where other means of feeding the world's population is sought? Where does your food come from?
Grocery store.
Fast food.
Walmart.
Denny's.
Ocean Friday.
Meyer.
Walmart distributors. Animals.
IGA.
Slaughterhouse.
Fishing. McDonald's.
Hunting.
Subway.
Family.
Dual market.
The earth.
The earth.
The planet.
Facts.
The earth.
The earth.
This is the earth. Dirt to some, life to others. Within are the vital nutrients that allow current civilizations to flourish since their beginning. It's a resource that hasn't really been a priority to those of us in developed countries because we take for granted that it will always be there. And yet, it's desired always in underdeveloped countries. Scientists believe that thousands of years ago, humans reaped the benefits of the natural environment by simply foraging for it. They ate on the go. At first, plants were believed to be the first items on the menu. Fruits, nuts, and various other forms of plant life were acquired to feed the small family. When the local area was depleted of food, they moved on. Inhabitants of temperate zones had a more difficult time than those in areas where plants grew throughout the year. As the seasons changed, they learned that food was plentiful during the warm season and was scarce during the cold season. This situation forced inhabitants to adapt to their environment in order to survive. The adaptation would lead to the development of stone tools. It's believed that the act of hunting wasn't the first method of acquiring food, but the scavenging of meat and bone marrow of dead animals. Stone tools were used to remove the edible tissue after a predator's visit. This method of early human subsistence is referred to as opportunistic, and that the opportunity to eat is based on finding a dead animal. Hunting and gathering techniques kept population growth in check. Their survival was based on the need to find food. Approximately 18,000 years ago, as the climate warmed and became more moist, the domestication of plants and animals led to the adventure of agriculture. Specific grains and animals were cultivated and bred to increase the availability of food. The cultural lifestyle during this period allowed for the development of permanent settlements due to the ability to store food for long periods of time. Now the population could grow. The societies we live in today are based on the careful development of how early humans adapted and managed their natural environment. Agriculture was the basis of survival.
At this point, we see that human beings probably tended to, okay, now there are these grasses, it's a hard work to collect these seeds and eat, because now imagine you have a handful of seeds. You have to get all that energy from that handful of seed that you might have collected all day. That's not efficient, that's not enough. And therefore, a larger settlement now became smaller parts or smaller groups of settlements that were sustaining themselves with this available energy that was there. So this was 13,000 years back. We see that climate played an important part in how we perceived and how we could, what we could eat. However, human beings became smarter. There are different hypotheses saying, why did we change to agriculture? Because if you look at it, hunter-gatherer societies are actually better off than agricultural societies, because hunter-gatherer societies are sometimes called the true leisure societies, where they had plenty of time. They could, they probably spent 6 hours a day collecting food maybe and hunting, and the rest of the time they had to themselves, and they were doing whatever they did and the spare time. Now compare it with what we do now. Do we have spare time at all? We are supposed to be a better society than that. We don't. However, the hunter-gatherer societies, energy-wise at least, they were better off because they were smaller groups of people, but they were maximizing the energy they got from primary and secondary production. Secondary production being gazelles or whatever else, bison, that were being hunted, that converted the solar energy that was converted by plants into edible energy. Now bison ate it and converted it to an energy that we could eat.
As time progressed, specializations began to develop where certain members of a village were tied to the land to raise food. Some made their livelihood making tools for the farmers and hunters. Some established the laws of the land. The establishment of society didn't happen overnight. It took centuries to achieve a sense of security. Knowing when the next meal would come depended on thoughtful planning and execution of those plans. Today, we simply don't have to plan because we can get into our car and drive to a fast food restaurant and eat, not thinking about where the food came from, and knowing it's always going to be there. Or is it?
Climate, droughts, natural hazards, storms, winds, whatever it might be in the world, cause food shortages as a result of crop failure. They cause crop failure. It's humans, by failing to provide food to these people who have experienced a disaster, that experience the famine and they die. It's most interesting. It doesn't matter what your religion is. Any religion that has a written text talks about the origin of the earth. And every one states somewhere in there that on this day this was created, the next day something was created. In every case, food was available before humans were created. And what's most fascinating about this wonderful earth of ours is that we have food being planted, cultivated, nurtured, and harvested every hour of every day, of every week, of every month, throughout the year. But unfortunately, there are occurrences. Natural, we say drought to begin with, but it could be something else, a natural hazard. Or cultural, a war, a denial, a breakdown in communication, of transportation, a cultural bias, a hatred. All this manifested in a horrible way, a way that in some cases is denial of food for people. And you can go through history and you'll find that humans themselves, by denying food to humans, really created the worst famines on the surface of the earth.
Hardships and setbacks would often occur in the past. Survival of a community depended on the will of the community. It took everyone working together to achieve the ultimate goal of surviving. Before the modernization of food production, families and communities had to plant their food as soon as the last frost occurred. If they delayed, their food for the long winter would not be ready and misery would set in. Nature takes time. It can't be hurried only to benefit our existence. And what if nature can't sustain agriculture? In some places on Earth, it isn't simply a lack of organization or planning that causes hardships for civilizations, but it's that climate has evolved to the point where the landscape is no longer sustainable for farming.
Right now, the Earth is going through a period of climatic change. The Earth is heating up. The Earth's climate has changed a great deal in the past. This is not new to have climate change or climatic change. It's not unusual to have cold periods and warmer periods. This is normal. It's not unusual to have climatic variation. A climatic variation is a shift of climatic region, where climatic regions shift. that's happening about. What is abnormal today is the speed, and the speed of climatic change and variation that's occurring on the surface of the earth today.
In Kazakhstan, there are two. Kazakhstan and in the south, there are two rivers that feed the Aral Sea, Amu Darya and Sir Darya. And in this river, during Soviet policies, what they did to maximize irrigation. Of course, Kazakhstan is a semi-arid area, and there are these rivers feeding the Aral Sea. What we have seen in the last 30 years is that over-irrigation of these rivers, over-exploitation of these rivers in semi-arid area for agriculture has, for cotton and wheat and so on, has actually salinated the soil. Because in an arid area where you over-irrigate, what usually ends up happening is tremendous amount of evaporation. And with the evaporation, salts from underneath in the soil are sucked up due to capillary action. It sucks up slowly, and then land gets salinized. One. Another, what we have seen specifically in the Aral Sea condition, is that the sea has not received the fresh water. So the sea has actually dried up. Satellite images show us today that 60% of the sea is almost gone.
As we move into the future, what will be in store for the natural environment as our population continues to explode? How will we adapt as we expand into prime farmlands? What will it take from a society of diverse people to come together to execute a plan of feeding the world's growing population as climate change continues? Scientists agree that climate change is presently occurring. Only recently did governments around the world agree with the scientific community that although the change is natural, humanity is drastically increasing the rate of warming. We've heard about the effects of a warming climate, the melting of ice caps that will ultimately reshape coasts and drown streets of major coastal cities. Specific continental areas lose the ability to retain moisture needed to sustain agriculture.
Well, if you look at the United States, we show on our maps that our climates of the southern tip of Florida moving northward to include almost the entire Gulf Coast littoral in about 75 to 100 miles, different climate. But all the climates are moving north. Now, what does this mean? It means that the standard pattern, the world pattern of global food production is going to change. Now, who is going to be impacted most? And that was the object of my study. And those who are going to be impacted most are, number one, those who live in Africa, those who live in the Middle East, those who live in Central Asia, those who live in North China, those who live in any marginal area on the surface of the earth. And who? What group within a culture? The poor. Those who are living, shall we say, an existence day to day, where there's limited food reserves, limited storage of food, or if there is a shortage in these areas, there's no food available to them unless it comes from the outside. So the problem in the year 20,000 or 22,100 will be that climatic change is going to drastically modify the agricultural geography of the world. And this is going to create a situation, a potential situation. This is because it's all potential. It's all conjecture. A conjectured situation of massive famines.
One of the biggest things that will limit agriculture in the future will be freshwater availability. Freshwater availability, it is known for quite a while now that in the next 50 years we are going to have problems. We already have seen instances of that in Australia, where there was a huge drought. We saw an instance in the United States. Atlanta last year had a huge problem with water shortage. We take water for granted, but it will be a big issue when it comes to today. If you watch some of the big companies that advertise on TV, one example would be General Electric. They advertise for desalination. They have an advertisement that says we desalinize water from the ocean to make fresh water. The fact that they are even advertising at this stage tells us that there is a market for it today. Why? Because it is a tenuous situation. Fresh water is a very minuscule part of our geosphere. So in the next 50 years, if not food, it'll be wars based on for water. If not food or oil, it'll be wars for water resource sharing.
The landscape is fragile and complex. It's needed to continue civilization into the future, as it has been demonstrated for thousands of years. Once it's modified, its splendor and usefulness is lost forever. Think for a moment what the landscapes would look like well into the future. Although these visions are only hypothetical, they are possible. And that is what we are here to do. Critically think what if, because we simply don't have foresight, only hindsight. Will our cities dominate vast regions that were once held by agriculture? How much farmland will there be in relation to the urban? If inflation continues to rise and agricultural land dwindles, what will the ultimate price of food be in 50, 100, or 200 years? Will a pound of beef cost $25? Will a can of peas set a family back $10? If these things come to pass, how will we deal with the reality?
Across the surface of the earth, you will have these urban nodes, these megalopolises, these major urban clusters, hundreds of miles long or wide or whatever it might be. And then you'd have almost voids to the next megalopolis. If you look at the earth as I projected, the year 2100, at night, you would have these clusters of lights and voids, clusters of lights. But these urban areas are going to have populations of 30 million, 40 million, 50 million people per conurbation, per megalopolis. This is going to be the problem areas of the world if there is a food shortage, because it will be the poor people, the less fortunate people, living in these urban areas who will suffer.
In the hunter-gatherer society or early agricultural societies, what we saw was that the nutrients that you took, the inorganics that was converted to organics that you ate, went back into the land. When you died or you defecated, it went back into the land and put the inorganics back into the, not the solar energy of course, but then everything else goes back into the system. But today what we see is many rural areas or third world countries feed urban areas, or in many cases first world countries or developed countries. So what happens is nutrients are taken away from one place, deposited in somewhere else, right? It doesn't go back to the same system. That's a huge problem. Where does it end up? Usually urban environments. Those nutrients end up in the sewage that ends up in the ocean. And today actually there was a recent research that shows that a large part of our oceans are actually under tremendous stress because of human impact. We don't know about it because we don't see it visibly, but it is a tenuous situation that we will face in the next 20 years.
Evidence of megalopolis is currently in progress in the Midwest. Post-war Indianapolis was a booming city with fields of corn, soybeans, and livestock surrounding its dense urban life. A few miles to the north lay two prosperous cities, Fishers and Noblesville. Throughout much of their history, until only recently, Noblesville and Fishers were deep into agriculture. It was easy to travel just beyond the small city limits to find many farms dotting the landscape that raised cattle, swine, and grew crops. It was a treat to venture to the big city to the south to enjoy fine food and shopping. As the baby boomers began having their children and started their own families, the towns began to grow in size. In the last decade, the shift from agriculture to urban sprawl has taken precedence. Where there were once fields of corn, there are shops and restaurants. Where there were cattle, there are parking lots. Farmhouses have been replaced by subdivisions. The weekly venture to the big city is no longer a treat. Indianapolis, that once covered only one county, has expanded into 9. What of the future? Will Chicago and Indianapolis be a megalopolis of the Midwest? And what of the vast agricultural lands between? Will they be converted to an urban environment? Where there were fields to feed these cities, where and how will we grow our food? Without the sun, life doesn't happen. It's the essence of life on Earth. Second is water. Without water, the food we need to survive doesn't grow. Seeds don't function. Without seeds, beef, chicken, and pork won't make it to the table. The future availability of these vital natural resources must begin with the education of today's inhabitants.
For you, as a teenager who looks at these problems and wonder what you can do individually, choices again. Things that you buy. Tell your parents what you want as your choice. Do you want your iPod or Zune or whatever you buy to be environmentally friendly? For you, those things are the choices that you can make. Instead of thinking that my friend has this particular gadget and I want the same thing, you can actually be cool if you have the environmentally friendly product rather than the most in thing, which need not be environmentally friendly. So your coolness factor comes in there. It is actually cool nowadays to be environmentally friendly. You are not looked down on anymore. It used to be that way.
It's very disturbing because, number one, it's not only complacency, they don't care. Number one, it's not been introduced to them. Climatic change and variation is so important. Climate has such an important role in your life. Such an important role. You're created and adjusted in the evolution process to be able to survive in a particular climate. That's why you have different skin color. That's why you have different lengths of nose. That's why you have different sinus passages. You have passages that protect your brain, to keep your brain warm so that you don't die. That's why you have different lengths of arms, different lengths of legs. The difference in the body configuration between an Eskimo and a Watusi in Africa. These are adjustments. Even your hair, whether you have peppercorn hair or lack of hair or regular hair, it's all a factor of weather and climate.
Just sit in visit forests, just your local national park. Don't go picnicking with your radio. Just sit quietly and watch. Things won't come together at the same time. You have to spend some time and watch all the things that go on around it. I don't have to tell you anything. Just sit and watch. And you'll appreciate it. Nobody has to teach you these things. You just sit and watch how beautiful, how functional that system is. Why would you want to disrupt it? I don't have to say anything. Your environmental teachers do not have to teach you anything. You will come away with that feeling because you are, after all, you were not very far away from that 50, 100 years back. Your ancestors were not very far away from that natural system. We have somehow become plastic and metal only now. So it's still in you. It'll affect you. Just sit there and watch. I don't have to teach you. You don't have to go to school. Nature will teach you. You just have to feel.
To learn more about this program and take a look behind the scenes, visit our website at tempestusproductions.com.
you.